Good afternoon. We greet you on a sad note this afternoon. Rodney Harbour, our December SAIAshare presenter, passed away earlier this month. You may remember his humour and down-to-earth wisdom and applied knowledge. We offer Roz and the family our sincere SAIAshare condolences. So, a very warm welcome to all of you to SAIAshare number 32. Isn't it sobering to think that we are already into month 3 of 2024? I am Eugene Barnard. Maria Pascini from SAIA's practice desk joins me as your host for the afternoon. Welcome, Maria. We trust you will all enjoy the event with us. Welcome behind the scenes to Karina Gibson from ECPD and to Marlene van Nivenhuizen from SAIA. Both render invaluable service to the SAIAshare program, and we are most grateful for them. We invite you to post questions and comments in the questions box during the presentations, and we endeavour to answer them all. In session 2, Tyrone Bloch will be telling us about their award-winning project, the Herschel Atrium Building, and other projects by KLG Architects. But first, I'm privileged to introduce you to someone whose name you will no doubt recognize. Rudolf Opperman retired last year as technical advisor for architecture and the National Building Regulations, a position housed within the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications. Rudolf was in private practice for a number of years and an associate of a large national practice. Then he was appointed as Building Control Officer for the City of Johannesburg. He held the position of Building Regulator within the City of Johannesburg for 17 years before joining the NRCS. He was Technical Advisor for Architecture and the National Building Regulations for 14 years. He now consults, and we are privileged to have Rudolf with us this afternoon. Rudolf, over to you.
Thank you very much, Eugene, and thank you very much everybody for who's linked in into this webinar. I do not take it lightly. I appreciate the fact that I'll be able to discuss some pointers of the National Building Regulations with you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get this going. The National Building Regulations, Building Standards Act is a very, very vast, big subject. So I'm not going to try and teach you about the legislation this afternoon. I'm going to just highlight a couple of items. And what I hope to do is more keep it short and allow for discussion. You're free and welcome to ask any questions you are faced with, and any information that I can throw you with, so that we can have a discussion and make this thing move. We know that there's a whole lot of secrets that are hidden from us in terms of the National Building Regulations, Building Standards Act. But to put it in a nutshell, I think we need to start here with where we have an owner, a client, and this owner and client on the building, and he needs to get a set of blueprints or a technical document that describes what he wants to build, but also at the same time shows him what his dreams are supposed to be. And the only way we can get to the blueprint is by employing building environmental practitioners, and these chaps are taught at tertiary level to put together a set of technical information. This technical information has got a remarkable similarity to what is described in the National Building Regulation as minimum information that must be displayed on a drawing. So if we take that drawing and use the technical information that has been provided for by the professional team, that drawing can be scrutinized to determine as far as yes or no. Usually the same drawing is also provided to the developer, the main contractor, the bondholder, all of the other side of the building environment, but all other regulators, such in this case the National Home Builders Registration Council. So if we take this building plan and we submit it to the local authority uses the National Building Regulation Building Standards Act, which says all buildings need to be treated uniformly. It has to be in the field of buildings. It must also fall within the jurisdiction of local authorities, and how we prescribe the solutions by using South African national standards provided by the SAIAshare. Each and every local authority is appointed or is forced to appoint a building control officer. These building control officers come from our profession, and the building control officer then scrutinizes the building plan and then at the end of the day determine if it complies to the legislation or not. If it complies to the legislation, we'll grant an approval. That'll open up the gate for the construction to commence, where all of the specialist trades get involved, and they, at the end of the day, complete the building. Once the building has been completed, the building control officer will issue an occupancy certificate. And that's the end of this legislation. We do not look after maintenance, and we are not involved with building after yet it having been completed. So what is this legislation? This legislation is the National Building Regulation Building Standards Act. It was created in 1977. So it's old order legislation. It's a good vintage, and I can guarantee you that all of the loopholes that were written into it in 1977 has at this stage been effectively closed. It also requires that all new building work in South Africa must comply to regulation, as it is the building code. It is a performance-based code, which means it states how a building and its components must perform, as opposed to describing how the building must be designed and constructed. The intention of the 1977 Act was clearly to create an overarching legal and technical framework for the building industry within which regulators could administer the national building regulations. We then have a Constitution 1996. Please take note, it is not linked to the 1977. For instance, items such as municipality, the definition of municipality in the 1997 Constitution differs considerably from the definition of municipality in the 1996 Constitution, and therefore arises one of the main problems that we have with the legislation. That said, Constitution states that a local government has original powers and functions given to the municipalities. And it is not just normal powers, it's executive authority over municipal authority matters. So in other words, the municipalities get their power directly from the Constitution itself. And you must also note that national government, provincial government, their legislative powers over Schedule 4A and 4B, as described in the Constitution, are limited. So therefore, we've got a disjunction between national government, which is 1977 National Building Regulation Building Standards Act, and how it is performed at local government level in terms of the 96 Constitution. So the Constitution, Schedule 4 that I've just discussed, describes the original powers and function of municipalities, and they had a long list, and in that list are two items that affect us as a profession very clearly. It's municipal planning legislation, and of course the National Building Regulation and Building Standards Act, which is also part of the original legislation. We also have in the Constitution section 26 that says everybody has the right to have adequate housing. Now, adequate housing is described as a building that satisfies the building code of that country. And therefore, it is envisaged that the National Building Regulation, Building Standards Act will be the legislation that will describe adequate housing. It's a far cry because we're not there yet. So if we look at all of the other governmental role players, the biggest role player by far is the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. They have 3 regulatory arms, the first one being the Council for the Built Environment. And that's the council that regulates the professions that deal within the built environment. So SACAP, EXA, to name only 2 of them, are governed by the rules by CBE. That's the developmental side of the construction. If you look at the construction side, the Construction Industry Development Board is also regulated, and that's where the contractors and their qualifications are measured and regulated. We also have a body called Agrima South Africa. Agrima South Africa provides national standards for which no national standards exists. That might sound very funny, but if we have, for instance, something that you cannot describe by using bricks and mortar, because that's what the National Building Regulation focuses on. So anything outside of bricks and mortar, and usually innovative building technology products, they are tested by Agrima South Africa, and Agrima South Africa will then issue a Agrima certificate stating that the building product is fit for purpose and therefore can be used in the built environment. And that certificate is then submitted to the building control officer, and they will accept that as being satisfying the built legislation. If I look at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, that's where the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification sits. It's the old regulatory arm of the SABS, but once we became part of the world again, they said you can't have the referee and the player in the same organization, and therefore the NRCS split from the SABS, and it is the responsibility for the NRCS to make sure that the national building regulations are developed in accordance with the instructions given from the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The regulations forms the building code. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the focus of our profession. That's where the legislative focus should be brought on, as opposed to SANS 10400. SANS 10400 is not legislation. And if you speak to most of the architects, they will tell you, no, but SANS 10400 is the law. No, it's not the law. The 10400 is but a recipe book that will allow you to provide a solution that is required by the National Building Regulations. So the SANS 10400 suite of documents are created by Captains of Industry, who is brought together by the SABS as the Secretariat, and they use the regulation as the basis to give solutions to the National Building Regulation. If I look at the third bigger player, Human Settlements, they have an organization called the National Home Builders Registration Council. They must understand the National Building Regulation specifically did not address quality. That used to be the role of the architect, who would then, as a professional, deal with quality on behalf of the owner, also knowing the industry and how far the industry should be able to satisfy the quality. That fell away when it came to spec housing. And therefore, the banking fraternity requested the Department of Human Settlements, Department of Housing at that stage, to bring in quality regulations. And NHBRC does that by registering home builders throughout South Africa. So if the home builder doesn't satisfy the minimum quality, they are provided the opportunity to provide such quality, and if they can't, then they are removed from this council registration council, and therefore will not be able to provide housing in the future. You must understand their main focus is on the quality of the housing. And they also run a warranty scheme to ensure that if something goes wrong, that there are some monies available to deal with the correction of the faulty work. Basic education, they do most of our school buildings. I must, however, say that government made a decision that up to 60, I think it's 65% of the public purse in the future shall be spent by using innovative building technology. And basic education is going that route of rather putting up what in our old terms being prefab schools as compared to brick and mortar. If we look at science and innovation, that's a SAIAshare, and of course they do all of the research when it comes to our built environment, and they're still running properly by bringing in support to the building industry. Then Department of Employment and Labour, of course they are the custodians of the construction regulations 14 and occupational health and safety construction regulation 2003. The construction regulations predominantly looking towards the protection of the laborers who erect our buildings, and the construction regulation 2003 predominantly looks after the quality of buildings after the occupancy certificate has been issued. So they take the step further to make sure that the building complies. The Lisbon Bank building burnt down, firemen killed in the disaster, and the building was condemned before the fire by the construction regulation 203. It didn't comply at the time to the requirements that was laid down by that legislation, not the national building regulations. And then the last big player, the Cooperative Government Traditional Affairs, they've got a regulatory body, SALGA, South African Local Government Association. And through SALGA, we have, sorry, maybe I should go back there. We have the cover for the municipal building control officers. So they all situate within the Cooperative Government and Traditional Affairs Ministry. Just understand there's also a whole bunch of different acts that are linked or affect the National Building Regulation Building Standards Act. And there I've just noted a quick 22 of them. It's not an exhaustive list. There are many more of them. And understand the absolute quagmire of information that we must deal when we are in the field of architecture or in the profession of architecture, trying to get all of the building plans submitted to local authorities. Because not only does the local authority appoint a building control officer, who, as I said, sits with the Constitutional empowers the local authority to enforce this legislation, and the Act, our Act, National Building Regulation Building Standards Act, compels each and every local authority to appoint a municipal building control officer, BCO, and his function is to advise the local authority on building matters and to ensure that all building applications are examined, and during the construction of all buildings that they are inspected to ensure that they comply to the National Building Regulation and Building Standards Act. So how does our legislative frameworks sit together. First, we have an act. And unfortunately, in this act, it binds the work that we do. Section 3 of the act says there are provided the duties of draftsmen and of plan specification documents and diagrams. Any person who prepares any plan submitted in terms of this act shall affix his name and address, and in the case of the architect, also his profession and registration number to such plan. So we are directly linked into the National Building Regulation Building Standards Act at the highest level. Remember, acts of Parliament are created by Parliament, and you cannot change any of the requirements except if Parliament themselves decide to do so. With the Act is a set of regulations. The regulations are the how to satisfy the Act's requirements. And within that section in the regulations, part A, administration, it says if you design, plan, supervise any building or structure, or the performance of any function in connection therewith, the person undertaking such work is required to be registered in terms of the Architectural Professions Act 2000 or other acts. But that's where we are then physically not only bound by the Act, but we're also bound by the set of regulations. Please take note, this Act was written in 1977, so it's not new legislation, it's old legislation. Then we've got a set of deemed to satisfy documents. And because we don't want to reinvent the wheel every time we submit building plans, we provide you with a set of easy followable building solutions. These solutions are provided by nominated captains of industry, and they research and debate the requirements and bring solutions that will satisfy the building regulations. And that's what we call the deemed to satisfy the regulation rules. Please take note, the Act is the empowering legislation. The building industry shall be regulated. The regulations are compulsory. It says that if we want to satisfy the Act, then we must take a building, break it up in its components. And if we talk foundations, the National Building Regulation requirement set for foundations is that the foundation must be strong enough to carry the loads imposed on it, full stop. It doesn't tell you how or prescribe solutions. That is left for SANS 10400. And please take note, there are rules. They're not compulsory. They are solutions, but there are more than one solution, not only the SANS 10400 set of solutions. Please take note, the Act also states a step further, that it says that no building may be erected without prior approval in writing from the municipality concerned. So no building is allowed to be built without having a set of approved building plans. Any person erecting any building without the approval building plan constitutes an offence and results in a conviction. Last part says not exceeding 100 rands per day. But if you look at the amount of time that we have buildings not complying, the 100 rand per day quickly adds up to be an enormous amount of money. So where are we going with the national building legislation, ladies and gentlemen? It's a 46-year-old legislation. It's outdated. The Act is not aligned with the Constitution. The Constitution talks about a three-tiered government. The 61 Constitution under which the National Building Regulation was created didn't have three spheres of government. The definition of municipality was a small little dot on a map which constituted the built-up area. Outside of the built-up area was an area called peri-urban. The National Building Regulation was not applicable in that area. Area outside of the peri-urban area was the TBV states. They were considered to be countries, not part of this legislation. And now we have wall-to-wall municipalities in the 96 Constitution, which means that a vast area in South Africa that was previously not governed by this legislation is suddenly forced to be controlled by this legislation. And it was never dealt or never meant to deal with farm animals and even the homelands, which we have vernacular architecture that is accepted. Our legislation talks about the owner stays responsible, and the owner must submit building plans to the local authority. 2/3 of KwaZulu-Natal belongs to the king. And that king, in terms of this National Building Regulation 1977 legislation, has to submit building plans on behalf of all the people under his jurisdiction. It just doesn't work. So it needs to have some serious changes made to that. The second point I have there needs to be fundamentally rewritten. It's a good piece of legislation, make no mistake. So good that each and every other legislator has piggybacked onto it. So you can't do X, Y, and Z before you get an approval in terms of the National Building Regulation, thus burdening the National Building Regulation to such an extent that it's practically impossible for us to get buildings out of the ground. So we need to shed ourselves from that burden and therefore make sure that we rewrite a new legislation. We need to make sure that the local government and national government do not step on each other's toes and therefore have the vested interests of both the spheres of government to be clearly outlined and demarcated. Significant court decisions. A whole bunch of constitutional court cases has been brought against the National Building Regulation. And so we have a piece of absolutely broken legislation that the local authority building control officers are trying their best to make it work, but it is broken. And make no mistake, they feel the pain. We are very frustrated with the way in which they operate. I can assure you they're trying to do the best under the circumstances that they're sitting in. Our regulations are outdated. We haven't dealt with any regulations since 2009. And in 2009, we brought in energy efficiency and a couple of definition changes. Before that, we didn't touch the regulations also for 10 years prior to that. So they are broken similarly. The regulations have not kept abreast with the building industry fundamental requirements. We're sitting in a situation whereby we have specialist applications and we need to have third-party certification. In other words, if I have a specialist building product, which is not described in the National Building Regulations or the SANS 10400 documentation, how can I get the building control officer who has got a minimum qualification to determine if it satisfies the technical environment that it's being used? So therefore, we need to get people to start saying that this year I am installing this special glass, and I guarantee you that this glass complies to the minimum requirements in legislation. The same with insulation, the same with roof trusses, and the like, plumbing fittings, and the list carries on. We also have a situation whereby all buildings are currently legislated. But with the size of the staff that we have to focus specifically on the big risk components. So small little toilet additions need not be put through the full extent of the law. Those should be easy fixes and get them out of the system. And where the critical mass of risks are, like in big buildings, that's where most of the information should go into, or the scrutiny room. That also opens up a situation whereby we start talking about self-certification. We as architects seen as professional, and therefore if we have and we can demonstrate the contextual knowledge that is required in terms of this legislation, we should be able to certify that the building complies. Even go so far as taking business information modeling systems and putting it through an electronic scrutineering process, and that the electronic system will then certify that the building complies, yes or no. Like in many other parts of the country, in the world, that is currently being used. And that will also then create a new team of specialized practitioners within the architectural profession, people who can certify that the building complies, yes or no. Unfortunately, the Constitutional Court has ruled that our review board, which was the appeal mechanism available to the building public, was found unconstitutional. And because of that, we currently do not have an appeal mechanism other than going to the High Court, and that's a lengthy and a very expensive process. So we are actually dealing with the local authorities who at this point start getting to a position whereby they are blackmailing our applications, and that's unacceptable. We also understand that the majority of South Africans do not have title deeds to the property. And our legislation says that the owner is responsible, and the person who is the owner is the one whose name is depicted on the title deed. And nearly 60% of all South Africans lived on land or dwellings held outside of our land titling system. So this legislation is focused on about 40% of the inhabitants of this country, where the rest is not dealt with. And that's what we need to have addressed in the new Act. What does our building industry look like? You tell me. Seems like we're on a downward trend. It's difficult. Speak to any of the big developers, they say it's an absolute miracle if we get a building out of the ground. And that is detrimental to us as a building industry and our economy in the long run. So our 1977 Act does not cater for the 2024 building industry and the building society. We have legislative uncertainty resulting in the local authorities applying the legislation more stringently, and also goes so far as allowing the town planning departments to start dismissing the National Building Regulation and Building Standards Act as inoperable and unconstitutional. And that's problematic. It's old order legislation that centralizes all matters relating to building standards and regulations in the national sphere of government. And both the relationship between the three spheres of government and the obligation to ensure that all administrative acts performed in terms of the National Building Regulations are not reflected at all in the 1977 Act. It may be argued that a substantial number of the Building Act and its provisions are unconstitutional. We don't deal with a three-party three spheres. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to have addressed you. Thank you.
Oh, Rudolph, thank you very much for giving us that succinct and yet comprehensive overview of the industry and the the legal framework. I've personally not seen it in this perspective yet. We have just a few questions, and regrettably, we don't have much time for questions. I'll fire away with the first question from Gabriel Maremi. Are there any building regulations that speak to designing with shipping containers? So just a brief comment on that, Rudolph.
Yes, thank you very much, Gabriel. The SANS 10400 TC is currently working on a set that deals with shipping containers. It is an ISO adopted standard, so it should take not more than a year to have that finalized. but in essence it will be a freestanding standard, the same as what you have timber construction and light steel construction. It will be seen as one of those items.
Okay, great. And presently, how is it dealt with presently?
Presently, the only way to have a container building submitted to the local authorities through a rational design solution. I didn't go into the solutions, and say in front of one of the many other solutions, rational design being the one, competent person taking responsibility for the solution.
Okay, great, thanks. Then just a brief question, Jannie Loubser, brief answer. How is the inverted commas Blikkiesdorp regulated under NBR, if at all? And I'm not sure
what the biggest problem that we have in South Africa is that as soon as you have a definition of informal settlement, the definition of informal settlement states that no legislation is applicable in this area. And it goes a step further. Places like Khayelitsha, in their founding documents, it says the National Building Regulation is not applicable within this area. So those are the major challenges that we have, is that the most vulnerable of our community is protected by the legislation that deals with health, safety, structural stability, and fire.
Okay, great. Maria, would you like to voice Vivian Hobbs's comment, if you've got it?
Yes, Vivian Hobbs says, thank you. The updates are necessary, and I wonder how long this would take.
Maria, I missed that. You said, I just heard how long it will take. What's the first part, please?
The updates the updates you might have referred to of the regulations or the act.
Yeah, we're sitting with the regulations are updated. The minister will not update up to the stage where the act hasn't been addressed. The act has been earmarked for rewrite in 2015, and we're not moving on that.
Okay.
There's no possibility of the act going anywhere, and maybe we should push from our sides to have the act dealing with it. So I see no light at the end of the tunnel at this stage.
Okay, great. Okay, Rudolf, thank you so much. John Bizinos made the comment, what a quagmire to charge through. And Vivian, thanks for your comment again, interesting. Rudolf, once again, on behalf of all the attendees, thank you so much. And I'm going to then pass the baton on to Maria, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Eugene. It's my pleasure to introduce Tyrone Bloch. Tyrone is a UCT graduate. He received the Top Overall Achiever Award for the 5 years of study. He's particularly interested in construction detailing and developing appropriate technical resolutions within the context of the South African construction industry. Tyrone is a director at KLG Architects in Cape Town. The firm was founded out of the Cooper Levin George architectural practice, having originally been started by Glennie McIntosh and John Egan in Cape Town in the 30s. Presently, Tyrone's fellow directors are Jeff George and Jan Douglas. The firm's projects include residential, hospitality, educational, institutional, and larger scale precinct planning. The firm focuses on the qualities of vernacular building traditions combined with the taste for simplicity, expressed in a contemporary form. Thank you very much, Tyrone, for your willingness to share your work with SAIAshare.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to Saya and Eugene and Karina for inviting me to present some of our work. It is a pleasure to be here. KLG's roots reach back to the early 20th century, starting with Glennie Egan Architects in 1917, joined by Sickle in the 40s, Cooper in the 80s, Levine, Lichtenberg, and George in the 90s, and now Jan Douglas and myself. This is a summary of what we're about and how we approach architecture in the firm. The first principle is the context, this physical, climatic, and social context informing the initial positioning. The diagram is very important to us, looking at the bigger picture and synthesizing it into its simplest form that can be expressed in a very simple diagram. Using appropriate technologies in appropriate ways, going back to first principles, getting the basics right, proportion, flow, layout, spatial dynamics. We refer quite a bit to a pattern language by Christopher Alexander. The working drawing is also integral to our practice. It's the guardian of the conceptual principles generated, and synthesizing this into deep into the detailing. We believe in making buildings that are able to take some change, thinking long into the future. What will these buildings be in 40 years' time? And we are a generalist practice, so specifically not specializing in any one mode of architecture. I'm going to go through some of the projects that we have been involved with at Herschel Girls School. Herschel is a school in Claremont in the southern suburb of Cape Town. We have been involved at the school for 18 years now, since 2006. The school began over 100 years ago and was built up organically over time, and in many ways with quite disparate buildings with little overall campus planning. One of the benefits of having a long history with the client is that we can work together towards a shared vision of the future, and not in a haphazard or bitty manner. Integral to all of our projects at Herschel has been generating and updating this overall campus master plan. Our main focus with regards to the precinct planning at Herschel is to identify the opportunities of growth without, wherever possible, taking up valuable open space on the relatively small campus. So identification of the existing buildings is a primary driver. Legibility and wayfinding in the campus is also integral to our planning, with the ordering of outdoor spaces into a series of interconnected courtyards that provide a hierarchy within the school campus. It attempts to knit together the disparate buildings in a sensitive yet contemporary manner, and give meaning to the spaces between the buildings and its immediate context within the campus. Over the years, we've been involved with many different projects at the senior school, but today I'm just going to focus on these four, which is the traffic redirection project, the chapel refurbishment, and then onto the atrium alts and adds, and then finally with the atrium extension project. This is our first project that we did at the school in 2006-2007. We were approached by the school due to their horrific traffic problems at the school. There was one entry and exit on Herschel Road with an internal traffic circle in the heart of their school, which has caused major traffic problems, and it backed up traffic on Herschel Road as well as within the school campus. So the first thing we did was to relocate the swimming pool on the south side up to the north side, which freed up a little bit of space on Kenmar Crescent, which allowed us to put a new entrance and have the traffic flow at the back of the school, have one-way traffic, and then out onto the Herschel Road. So this created a much longer stacking distance for the parents doing pickup and drop-off times, which alleviated a lot of the traffic problems on Herschel Road. It also opened up space, outdoor space for a formal primary courtyard within the school campus. It also gave a front door to the main reception and admin building on the campus, which is the oldest building on the campus. So on the left-hand side is how it was before. As you can see, most of that space is given up to vehicular traffic, and afterwards providing some outdoor social space, giving it back to the campus and the learners, creating quite a formal access to that main building and quite a formal aesthetic. This is looking in the other direction, back towards the atrium building, and which we'll get to just now. And one of the main buildings facing this formal forecourt is the Herschel Chapel. The chapel was built in 1939 by Walgate and Ellsworth. It's quite an important building for the school on the campus. It was built in the English Tudor revival with some arts and crafts influences. It was originally a library for the school. It was converted to a chapel in the 90s. It has some quite beautiful architectural features inside, and importantly, it has some very complex, complicated brick detailing around the windows. The reason why we were approached by the school was due to a catastrophic failure in the bricks at the windows. Inside of the bricks is steel reinforcing rods, and with close to 80 years of water and moisture ingress, these rods rusted very badly, expanding and eventually cracking all the bricks quite badly. The first step for us was to identify all the different brick types. There are 17 different types, all with different shapes, sizes, and cutouts depending on where it is in the window. So the head and the sill and the interconnecting bricks are all slightly different. These bricks were originally imported from the UK, but we were dead set on finding a local manufacturer. Carabrick luckily agreed to make the bricks for us. So we disassembled one of the windows, carefully saving the different brick types, and packaged them up carefully and shipped them off to Midrand to the Carabrick Specials factory. Carabrick generated these steel blanks and steel templates based on the existing bricks. And here's an image of it, of the bricks before firing. Here's a short clip of the manufacturing of the bricks at the Carabrick factory. They were all made by hand, cut out very carefully using the steel templates. All of the holes in the bricks were cut manually and using the steel wire cutters. All of the different shapes were cut out using the templates. Unfortunately, there were some hiccups on the way, where the contraction of the bricks was underestimated during the firing process in the kilns. This is due to just the size of the blocks of clay that were used, and a number of the batches of these bricks that were delivered to the school were unfortunately condemned, because they simply just were not usable, because they had to tie into the existing bricks and the shapes and sizes needed to be very precise. Carabrick luckily did stick with us and stuck with the project, and eventually we were able to start the reconstruction process. We worked with a very good contractor on this project, and it's to be very carefully done. So we made up timber frames for each window bay and carefully marked the coursing of the bricks, and built it up using 316 stainless steel rods. We also looked at the mortar between the bricks very carefully to prevent moisture ingress, as well as to match the existing color tones within the existing building. Here's just a few snaps of the finished product, and as you can see, you can hardly tell the difference between the new and the old. And here's an image of the outside of the building. We also refurbished all of the leaded windows, which were warping quite badly over the years. The next project was from 2013, called for additional classrooms, new full-grade venue, new tuck shop, eating area, social learning space. It was to be positioned in the heart of the school at the existing atrium block. The existing atrium building was originally designed by Louis Carroll in the early 90s. It had a curved building that related quite strongly to the theatre building that was also done by Louis Carroll. Our intention was to densify on the existing footprint, opening up valuable outdoor space on the campus and connecting this open space back towards the building. The other intention was to create a much stronger link between the new forecourt linking back to the north side of the school, which was quite cut off with the existing atrium building. This is an aerial photo of it during construction. So we demolished that curved classroom block, which we opened up this triangular space between the theatre and the atrium building, and straightened out the building with this straight building running south west to northeast, carefully integrating it into the existing roof lights and the existing atrium space. So this is creates a much stronger link from the former forecourt down towards the bottom of the school. On the ground floor, we have the new full-grade venue, the tuck shop, eating area, and the social learning space on the corner, which is there, which opens up into the heart of the school with a lot of visibility into the outdoor spaces on the campus. On first floor, we have the classrooms. On the left-hand side is how it looked before the alteration, and on the right-hand side is after. It creates quite a strong legibility on the campus, where the entrance is quite clear, and it's a very well utilized social learning space on the corner there, opening up onto the outdoor space. This is a view from the north side, looking back towards the forecourt at the main forecourt at the school. As you can see before, with the curve, it kind of cut off all of those connections, and there's now a strong pedestrian link up under the semi-shade of the new pergolas. We use quite simple materials, expressed in quite a contemporary manner, and expressing the natural properties of the timber and the screens and pergolas. This is a photo of what it looks like today, with the trees are doing very well with all the benches under the trees. It is one of the most vibrant spaces in the school, and is very well utilized right in the heart of the school. This is a photo from the existing atrium, looking through the eating area and tuck shop and out into the outdoor space. Another view of the tuck shop, and then another view of the Louis Carroll atrium in the eating area, and quite a strong connection to that outdoor space. Onto the atrium extension project. The brief was to house a new music department for Herschel, and the primary idea was to complete the existing atrium building with a ring of buildings around the perimeter, and then your light-filled atrium space and outdoor spaces within that ring. By drawing on the existing rhythms of the existing structure, scale, and proportions, we were able to give the new building a contemporary identity that works in harmony with the existing context. The north edge of the building reinforces that existing thoroughfare down to a new major entrance on Church Street, which now links that major entrance up to the rest of the school. A courtyard space separates the old atrium building with the new atrium building as an outdoor chill-out space, as well as a separation for acoustic purposes. This is just a quick fly through of the process of construction. So this is before construction started, during construction, and then finally the completed project. This is the basement level plan. The brief for the building was conceived during the day zero crisis, and as such, the basement holds 250,000 liters of water and water storage tanks in 3 compartments for irrigation, toilet flushing water, and potable water, with different levels of water treatment for each tank. It also houses a large school store, as well as a maintenance workshop. This is the ground floor plan. The building is arranged around a central inward-looking light-filled atrium space, which connects all of the venues together. The atrium space doubles as an impromptu performance space for music events. The ground floor venues are all the larger shared music venues, like the ensemble rooms, the drum room, the large auditorium choir practice room, and then the atrium space and the outdoor courtyard. The internal architectural detailing was predominantly determined by the rigorous acoustic focus. All of the music venues have a very high acoustic rating, which allows for multiple music venues to operate simultaneously within very close proximity. The first floor houses the practice teaching rooms, singular practice rooms, a music tech room, and then some larger practice and teaching rooms for the staff. And as well as a large gathering space, a social learning space in the atrium and the staff room. On second floor, has views up into the yellowwood trees of the Ardern Gardens. Ardern Gardens is to the south. It has uninterrupted views of Devil's Peak and Table Mountain to the north. They are also acoustically treated for teaching purposes. In section, the atrium takes a contemporary interpretation of the Louis Carroll atrium space, allowing that southeast light and ventilation through. The double volume space is the connector of all the venues, all opening up onto that central atrium space. And we looked quite carefully at the scale and the proportions of the extension to link up with the existing atrium building. As I mentioned before, the acoustic was a major focus of the building. We worked with Sound Research Lab, who were absolutely fantastic on this project. There were two main elements, which is the sound insulation, so the two venues can operate next to each other simultaneously, and then the sound absorption, which is the quality of the sound in the space. Each venue was assigned a different sound insulation rating, which generated this plan, which allowed us to determine what level of detailing is required in each venue to stop the sound from leaving that venue. We generally used drywall construction in order to avoid excessive loads on the structure. This is a typical drywall construction detail plan with a double layer of 15mm Firestop boards on a separate double stud system with the air gap between and high density insulation. In section, we have a thick 270mm concrete floor slab to stop the lower frequencies from getting through. Suspended underneath this on resilient ceiling hangers is a 15mm skimmed plasterboard ceiling with insulation above that. And suspended below that is our Class A grid ceiling. The floor is also mounted on resilient rubber blocks in order to avoid the sound penetrating into the concrete slab. None of these elements were allowed to touch. So the walls, the floors, and the ceilings were all separated by 10mm, either via a resilient perimeter strip or high-density polyurethane. The penetrations in the walls and the ceilings in the building were very carefully controlled. The electrical outlets were wrapped in putty pads. The mechanical fresh air system had offset intake and outtake vents with baffles between, so the sound had to travel through all the baffles in order to escape or get into the room. Any electrical conduits were also filled with tiny sandbags at the end to prevent the sound from escaping. The acoustic absorption in the music venues was also carefully considered. Each venue assigned a different reverberation delay time value. For instance, the ensemble live venue had 1.2 seconds and the dry ensemble room had 0.6 seconds. and this obviously affects how the sound works in the room and how it's taught. From this, in order to meet these requirements, we introduced various things in order to meet those requirements, which is the acoustic ceiling. So that's the Class A grid ceilings. We had acoustic wall paneling where necessary. We used pinning boards in the venues to absorb some of that sound, as well as curtains. So we have acoustically treated curtains which you can open and close to increase or decrease the reverberation in those venues. The other main way we reduced the reverberation within the venues was to utilize the existing geometries of the building itself, creating skew walls in the venues, so that there's less sound that is bouncing between two parallel walls. The public areas in the building, the passageways and the atrium space were also acoustically treated. And the right-hand side shows a photo of the Class A grid ceiling. Because this is not a sound insulating barrier, this is where all the penetrations and the light fittings and the fire detection system were installed in these in the grid ceiling. In the auditorium space, we have two thickened walls with sound insulation slats, with the insulation behind the slats. In these thickened walls was also the fresh air system that was mounted in those thickened walls. Just very quickly go through some photos during construction. This is the basement drainage and reinforcing layer. Tiling of the basement, you can see the three water storage tanks setting out. Topping out of the basement, going to ground floor reinforcing, building coming out of the ground, eventually getting a sense of the scale and the proportions of the building. And this is a photo from the outdoor courtyard looking back towards the atrium side. This is just a photo of the sawtooth roof during construction, and the perforated ceiling boards to allow the sound to be absorbed into the insulation overhead, and a lot of light and a lot of views of the sky in that main atrium space. And finally, this is just some of the photos of the completed building. See the additional building there. The atrium space is filled with light. We wanted to have a lot of visibility into all of the venues. So a lot of the venues have large panels of glass. Even the practice teaching rooms have glass in their doors, so that there's visibility into each music venue. This is just framing Devil's Peak. We used quite simple material palette. It's just white walls and the expressed beechwood timber paneling. This is looking back from the open outdoor courtyard into the atrium space. We were invited to the opening of the building where they held a concert in this main atrium space, and it was quite magical. All of the staff and parents and the learners all were on the first floor and all seated onto these seating steps, and the acoustics in the space were quite fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tyrone. Just to let you know that there were a few sound issues, but I think we managed to get the gist of what you were saying. And for me, I mean, a beautiful and considered building. I love the light and airy spaces. So one of my questions though is that I'm really fascinated with the brick making. And I just wanted to understand what the cost was, if it was like a normal brick or very pricey or not so pricey. And also, you know, was that the norm for the times as well, for the original building?
Thanks, Maria. The bricks, the cost of the brick, if I remember correctly, I think it was 110 rand a brick. So they were quite pricey elements. You know, it was I mean, you can really understand understand why it's as pricey as it was, because it takes a lot of effort to make bricks that complicated. You know, it's in 3 dimensions that you have to get right. You know, we had to get the coursing right, so the thickness had to be right, and a lot of the bricks had cutouts in 3 dimensions, not just in the 2 dimensions. You know, so yeah, I think it's quite a complicated process.
I'm sure it must have been. Did you not like to have a question as well?
Yes, Maria, can I maybe just mention, Tyrone, we're going to arrange with you, with your permission, just to re-record the presentation, so anyone then who would want to review it. We had a bit of, you know, your voice is breaking up a bit, but as Maria said, we could get the gist of it, so don't worry about that. I just want to thank Marilla Besaidnot, beautiful building, and obviously quite a challenge to match. Thanks, Marilla. Okay, Marlet Krieger, just to let you know that we'll speak to Tyrone about your request and see whether we can assist you. And Cheryl Durham, beautiful project. Thanks for the presentation. Iliane Lichty, looks like a great project. Cheryl says, excellent, thanks. Sean says, thank you, Tyrone, for a great presentation. Lula Scott says, loved it. Pity about the quality of the sound. Yes, Lula, we agree with you, but as architects, pictures, visuals are probably more important for us. The detailing is really incredible. Well done, Henry Payne says. And Tyrone, maybe I can just ask, what kind of, at what scale did you guys do your detailed drawings? Because you must have produced a lot of detailed drawings for this. I mean, just the acoustic detailing and, you know.
Yeah, no, it was an extremely high level of detail on this building, every single junction, and especially with the atrium roof, you know, because of that, the tapering edge, you know, so there was a lot of conditions that we had to maneuver around. So, you know, the amount of drawings we did, one is 1 to 20s, and down to 1 is to 5s, and then eventually down to 1 is to 2s for some of the bits and pieces. But yeah, the acoustic focus really was fascinating to be involved with, but it did require a huge amount of work to get the detailing to work, you know, in quite a crisp. We try to keep it quite crisp and simple. And when the acoustic element comes into play, it's quite easy for it to just run away from you, you know, because you know. So yeah, we did a lot of work on the detailing on this building.
Yeah. Maria, should we ask Tyrone what his fees were? We leave that for after. Yeah, back to you. Johan Sneyman has got a comment, and there are a few further comments you might like to take then.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, now let's just say Johan says, brilliant indeed, what a pleasure. And then Darren Bester, beautiful spaces. And Steve Archer says, thank you for the afternoon. Very interesting. Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated. And then there's one from Ken Lever. Ken, okay, Ken, we'll look at your comment. Thank you for your comment. It's just a bit difficult to put it into a nutshell. Neil Martin, thanks for the presentation. Impressive detailing. What quantity of bricks were manufactured? Iliane Lichty wanted to know. I suppose it's a difficult one. Shall we ask the QS?
Yeah, no, I can't actually remember. I think the original quantities was 1,000 bricks, and then I think we managed to get that down because we managed to save enough of the existing bricks and reuse the existing bricks. So I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. No, it's not a problem. Tyrone, can I just ask, what was the team of consultants? What was the composition of the team of consultants you had?
It was quite. It was just. It was KLG and an engineer basically. And we didn't.
KLG architects and you had a QS?
No, we didn't have a QS. It was just KLG, and we managed the costs, and then with an engineer that helped us with some of the engineering detail.
Structural engineering and
Yes.
and mechanical?
No.
Electrical?
Wait, sorry. Are you talking about the chapel or are you talking about the atrium extension?
Well, oh no, I'm talking about the atrium.
Oh no, the atrium. No, we had a full team of consultants on that project. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Including an acoustics consultant.
Yes. So we had a team, so it's architect, quantity surveyor, structural, civils, mechanical, electrical, acoustic guy. So it's a very full team.
Okay, let's just see. Maria, can you see the comments? There's one from Vivian Hobbs again and Mariette Krischer. I don't know whether you can pick those up.
Yes. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Okay.
Maria.
Says, thanks.
Okay. Sorry, I keep losing my place.
No, it's not a problem. I just want to acknowledge, Tyrone, the compliments from Mariette, from Neil Chetty, Zuko Fonda, and then Jazan Lowe wants to know what was the budget for the atrium project?
The overall project costs was, I think, 33 million, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that, Tyrone?
33 million, I think.
33 million. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Debbie. Athol, thank you very much. Engela, for your compliments. Don Garcia, Corina will attend to your request. And Haroon, thanks very much. Chetty, how long did the drawings take you? Neil Chetty wants to know. Documentation.
There was the project kicked off in 2018, at the beginning of 2018, and we were generating generating drawings as we were in council, and council took a very, very long time. So, probably, and I think a lot of the drawings were actually generated quite late at late stage. There was quite a lot of changes that were required from council side. So the building changed shape a number of times during the council phase. A lot of the drawings had to be redone. A lot of the detailing had to be redone. But a lot of it happened while we were on site, because there was a lot of on site maneuvering to get it right.
Okay.
I couldn't say how long in total.
Not a problem. Not a problem. That so you were pretty involved during construction as well then.
Yep.
Thanks, Johan and Zante. Thank you. Thanks, Fred. Piri, much appreciated. Lula, thank you. Justice Liebenberg. The glass detailing is beautiful. And I would assume, I don't know, yeah, were the glass for the sawtooth roof done without aluminium frames? He wants to know.
The glass was glued with structural silicon into aluminium angles. So tiny little aluminium angles. I think they were 25 by 25 angles that was then fixed onto the steel, structural steel. So it was quite seamless detailing without like a thick aluminium frame on that end.
Okay, great. And Noah, thank you. As I said, the presentation will be re-recorded. John Littlefield, thank you, and Ken Lever. Ken, and I think there's still questions coming through, but we've actually run out of time. So, Ken, can I park your question and maybe just pass it on to Tyrone and see whether he can just answer your question? Don, thank you. Rodney, thanks. Llewellyn, thank you. And Ethel, thank you for your comments. Colleagues, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you very much. And can I just say, in Tyrone and Maria's presence, that SAIAshare actually is your program. So thank you for attending. I can maybe just inform you that we had the highest percentage attendance of those who registered for SAIAshare this afternoon. So in other words, of those who registered, most attended. And we've had about 450 attendees, and we really thank you for attending. So I'm going to then just end off. Maria and Tyrone, you're welcome to take leave of us. Thanks very much to both Rudolf and Tyrone for the time you put into preparing your presentations. It does take a lot of time, and we thank you for it. We trust you've enjoyed, and by all accounts you have, the afternoon with us. And as already mentioned, SAIAshare carries a Category 1 CPD value of 0.1. Bank it, you'll need it in 3 years' time. We invite you to join us again on the first Friday of April, and that is the first Friday after Easter weekend. For those of you who haven't looked at your calendar yet, we look forward to meeting our guest presenters for April, Uwe Putlitz. We've had him before, and he will be sharing with us on the topic of failing contracts, symptoms, and remedies. And then Dr. Hendrik Oret is bound to amaze and inspire you on the topic of poetically rescripting architectural heritage resources. And maybe, Tyrone, it would be good for you to attend next SAIAshare for your next project at Herschel School. We are honored to have had two such knowledgeable colleagues share presentations on SAIAshare this afternoon. And to all of you who've attended, please join us next month. The following Charlie Mackessy's quote was posted by Rodney Harbour's daughter a day after his death on a WhatsApp group of Rodney's friends and colleagues. And it really made an impact on me because it is so true. Be in this moment, it's all we have. So to all of you who've attended, we wish you a wonderful month of March, and we look forward to seeing you in April. Keep well.